If people have what I like to call the explorer mindset, if people are curious and interested in what's around them, it doesn't have to be scientists. It doesn't have to be, students in school. It can be anybody.
This is Life's Tough, Explorers Are Tougher, and I'm your host, Richard Weiss. Scratch the surface of an explorer and you'll find an adventure and a great story. This show is about their tales. This podcast is a proud supporter of the Explorers Club and the EC50 initiative, 50 people changing the world that the world needs to know about. For more information, go to explorers.org. Welcome to Life's Tough, Explorers Are Tougher in association with the Explorers Club. Today's guest is Dr. Roxanne Beltran, a marine ecologist who studies one of the ocean's most unlikely deep-sea collaborators, the elephant seal. At her lab at UC Santa Cruz, Roxanne turns these giant blubbery divers, and I say that without offending them, into research partners, revealing how climate change is reshaping our oceans. Now, check this out. She has been on the cover of Science, which I think is way cool, named to the Forbes 30 Under 30, and she's also an Explorers Club 50. 50 people who are changing the world that the world needs to know about. But despite these accolades, what really stands out is her down-to-earth style, whether mentoring students, wrangling seals, or calmly debating climate change with skeptical relatives. Roxanne brings science, humor, and heart to everything she does. Roxanne, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. I'm grateful to be here.
I have to kind of laugh because I have been around elephant seals. And so when someone hears that you're on the cover of a magazine, that sounds really glamorous, right? Like that's a glam thing to be. And knowing how they really smell bad to people who aren't used to them, maybe to you, you like that smell at this point. But, are moments of glamour fleeting in what you do?
Yeah, we laugh whenever we're in a media feature like a BBC or a National Geographic feature because our hair is blowing in the wind and we look like we're slowly and carefully walking through these incredible creatures. It's like that some of the time, but a lot of the times we're being chased by aggressive males. We're a little bit stressed trying to, make sure that the sedation levels of the seals we're working with are exactly perfect. It's raining sideways and then it starts hailing. Should we call the day or should we continue going? So sometimes it's glamorous, but a lot of times it's a little bit less on the glamorous side.
I think when people get involved in conservation, or at least the thought of it, they think of maybe Jane Goodall walking hand in hand with a chimp through Gombe National Park. I think conservation is probably a lot longer hours and, as you said, more stressful or challenging situations.
That's exactly right. And it takes a big team. The research program that I work in, the Northern Elephant Seal Program, has been going since far before I was born. It was started in the 1960s. And it's really taken hundreds of researchers all contributing to this single long-term data set for us to be able to understand who the seals are, what they're doing, where they're going, and what we can do to protect them. So you're right. Some of the days it's this glorious, we're walking on the beach and we see our favorite seal and we get to interact with them and learn kind of how they're feeling that day. A lot of the times it's really a data heavy, community oriented task of going through and trying to figure out what we've learned over the last 60 years.
I wouldn't say for most people that would be the animal I would think of as a kid. Like I have a golden retriever just outside, a view. But what was sort of your gateway activity? How did you get involved with elephant seals?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the very long story short is that my mom likes to joke. I was always asking when I was a toddler, what's that? What's that? What's that? I just wouldn't stop. I was always curious about what things were and what they were doing and why they were there. And I didn't know that I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't really know any scientists. And I think my perception of the job was maybe very different than what it actually is. But when I got to college to play soccer at UC Santa Cruz, the soccer field overlooked the Monterey Bay, which just so happens to be one of the most species-rich habitats in the world. And I was paying my way through college. I needed to get work study jobs. And it just so happened that one of the work study jobs that I took was at the local aquarium. So I got to learn all about marine creatures and be able to learn how to talk about those creatures to the public in a way that would inspire awe. And then another job that I had was literally hosing poop and preparing food for the captive seal program that was here at the lab. And I just fell in love with them. I mean, they're not really like golden retrievers. You're right. They look at you with sort of a soulless expression. But when you really get to know a seal, it's like getting to know a human. I mean, you really understand them in a way that you can't help but want to protect them and all of the habitat that they rely on.
So when did you start going from, the aquarium to actually on the beach or out on trips with them?
I was super lucky, and at UC Santa Cruz, there's an incredible field-based learning program for undergraduate students. And so I got to do field courses. I got to go camping for the very first time. I got to go onto the beach with the seals to observe them and to take some data and to contribute to a research program. And that was really when I realized that science didn't have to be a desk job. It didn't have to be a lab coat, microscope type job, which I know a lot of people who do that and love it. But for me, I really have to be outside with my hands in the dirt, feeling like I'm doing something really awesome and exciting for me to feel like I'm alive. And so those opportunities made me understand that that was a career path that I could choose. And it was one that I would really enjoy doing. And so I ended up going to graduate school, getting a PhD, working in Antarctica, and then coming back to run the elephant seal program here.
Our mission is to empower the next generation of explorers. If you like this podcast, please recommend it to a friend and have them join the expedition. One of the things I've noticed, especially you mentioned that the research program's been going on since the 1960s. So relationships are formed because you spend a lot of time out on beaches with the same crew. And several years ago, I was actually in Hawaii on the Big Island, and I went to the funeral of a research monk seal. It was TT40. And it was a monk seal that had been researched for a lot of years. And so they had a Hawaiian princess doing a formal funeral. And there were a lot of the researchers, many different backgrounds, ages, crying at this. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope when I die that people are so sad. But, I guess what I came to realize is that this was more than just a research creature named TT40, which I remember, but the relationships and the time that people had spent together, it was a portion of their life.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, the seals themselves, we get to know individually. How the research works is when the seals are pups, we add a really small flipper tag to them. I actually have a little stuffed elephant seal here to show you. But we add a little flipper tag to the rear flipper. This one is C761. And so this is that seal's ID for the rest of its life. So the seal you're talking about probably had a flipper tag and was probably watched by researchers since that seal was a pup all the way until it died. And it's the same for us. We observe these seals all the way until their potentially 21-year lifespans are over. And over 21 years, I mean, you really get to know them. You watch them grow up, you watch them grow bigger, you watch them grow old, you watch them raise pups. You get to know those individual pups and then see those pups on the beach too. Sometimes the mothers and the daughters from several years apart will be right next to each other on the beach. And so you get emotionally attached to them and you learn their preferences, like where they swim and how deep they can dive and what they're like as moms and whether they tend to raise big pups or small pups, whether they tend to come to the beach early or late in the season. So that's just one of the many ways that we do the science. It's that we see the natural history, we see the patterns, and then we do the science to try to figure out why those patterns are happening or to describe them in a scientific way. So building relationships with the seals is a really important part of it. And then, like you said, it's building relationships with the humans too. So I was an undergraduate student who was just trying to find my way and figure out if I belonged here in Santa Cruz, figure out if I belonged in science. And it was a research group of incredible people who basically brought me up in science. They taught me everything that I know. They inspired me because they were so competent and confident working around these 1,000-pound carnivores on the beach. And it's what inspires me now in my job to be able to do the same for the next generation of explorers, to raise a group of students who, again, isn't sure they can do it or want to do it. They don't know how to do it. And then we go from that to them being so confident in the fields and working around the seals and with each other that they become leaders to other students. And it's so special to be able to see those relationships develop. And it's so special to see them develop their sort of observational relationships with the seals too, where they start to have favorite seals that are, for example, different than my favorite seal. And so our team is amazing and the seals are amazing. And we just feel so fortunate to be able to do the work that we do.
Well, elephant seals, I think most people really don't know that much about them. What do you find amazing or incredible? You meet, your relatives, maybe your grandmother or some other relative, and you're telling them why this is such a cool creature. What are some of those things you'd say?
Yeah, I like to tell people about how you're likely to see the seals on the beach in California where they're sleeping. They look so lazy, and that couldn't be further from the truth. This is just the 1 month that they're here resting in between these 10-month foraging migrations where they're exhibiting some of the best athleticism of any animal on the planet. They're basically traveling halfway to Japan from California, out into the middle of the featureless open ocean. They're diving down to thousands of meters below the ocean surface, holding their breath for up to 2 hours. They're finding fish and squid to eat in the dark using this sensory system of whiskers that they have on their face. And they're doing all of that while holding their breath. Then they gain hundreds of kilograms. They come back to the beach. By the way, they were pregnant that whole time. They give birth to a pup. They raise that pup. And that's when you see them on the beach. They're kind of sleeping, maybe laying down, nursing that pup. But when you don't see them on the beach, they're going on these huge migrations to find fish and squid. And I think that's one of the most incredible things about them.
I've read some of your papers and seen some of your, you just sent me a PBS special that you're in. Mm-hmm. And so you're using them also as a climate indicator. What is it that, you gather from them that helps us understand the overall climate picture?
We're using the seals as what we call smart sentinels. So sentinels in that they can bring us back information about the health of the ocean, not just in terms of, how much foraging success the seals have, but also the temperature of the ocean, the salinity of the ocean, and maybe how that's changing. And that's all measured in these instruments that we can attach to the seals so that these instruments can collect lots of data and bring the data right back to us. And smart because the seals are literally more evolved than we are to find hotspots of productivity in the open ocean because they have those whiskers and they have the memories of where they've been before. So they can lead us right to these oceanographic hotspots, these places we really need to protect because a lot of different marine critters rely on those resources to make a living in the open ocean. So they are smart and they are sentinels, and they come back to the beach 30 minutes north of the university where I work. And that's what makes them such incredible research partners. So if you think about the planet, 70% of it is ocean, right? And most of it is way far from shore, way far from human civilization, really deep below the ocean surface. Humans just can't access it. I mean, some incredible humans like Sylvia Earle can, but for the most part, I can't go out into the middle of the open ocean, thousands of meters underwater in the dark and learn anything at all. I mean, I would just die, right? So the seals have these incredible adaptations to go to these places to basically bring us there in terms of the information that they're collecting, and then come back and tell us the stories of what they've experienced and how that experience has changed over their lifetimes. And that's the power of the seal system in terms of allowing us to conserve the ocean.
And what was do you think, the biggest surprise or aha moment, during this research? We were like, oh my gosh, I never realized that, or that's amazing.
It's such a good question. I think the cover of Science that you were talking about is an article where we found, very surprisingly, that there was a lot of variation in how successful the seals were year to year. Because all of us think of elephant seals as these super robust creatures. I mean, you said it in the introduction, they have all this blubber, so they can really buffer against any sort of bad conditions. For example, when there are something like a marine heat wave, a lot of the seabirds and sea lions and other smaller or less fat creatures experience higher mortality rates or higher rates of starvation. And the seals are really robust against those sort of things. It's part of what makes them really reliable research partners. They still bring us back information when we really, really need it. But in those bad years, we do see that seals gain less foraging success. They have fewer pups. The pups are smaller. And those smaller pups are less likely to grow up to have pups of their own. And so we were surprised to see that even though elephant seals are this supposedly very robust animal, they still do feel the impacts of things like climate change.
But how do you reconcile the difference between, natural cycles of animals and climate change?
Yeah, the answer to that question really relies on the long-term research program. And so, I've been in my job for 5 years, but I'm able to work on this 60-year data set because of the partnerships and the amazing generosity of the people who came before me. And it's that 60-year data set that we really need because it allows enough time for us to really understand what the baseline looks like, just like what you're talking about. When the presses happen, when the pulses happen, when there are better years and worse years, but they're sort of within normal limits. And that really long baseline then allows us to say, okay, this year is really different. It's really outside of what we would expect from natural fluctuations. And that's what we're starting to see with things like marine heat waves, or even humans are starting to think about extracting deep sea resources like fish that the seals eat. And so we can begin to understand if things like that bring the marine ecosystem out of what you would expect in a normal year.
So, Roxanne, we're talking about global climate change, right? And I remember when you and I met in New York, we had a conversation, and without getting too political and mentioning names, both of us had relatives that maybe don't agree with global climate change, don't believe it's man-made. You actually have a PhD in this. And so you've dedicated your life, you're at Thanksgiving, and someone shrugs their shoulders. What is the response these days? Is there a response, or I'm just kind of curious to how you sort of tackle this problem. So you're at Thanksgiving, you pass the turkey and
asks about climate change. Yes, classic. No, I think you're totally right. And it's something that I think a lot of us are thinking about top of mind recently with the political climate and all that's changing in terms of funding resources getting cut and people having, a disbelief or a confusion about what science is and what it contributes. And what I like to say is that, the work that we're doing is so important, and I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't truly believe with every fiber of my being that things are changing and that it's not good. And the way that I typically try to engage people in conversation is by telling them stories about one seal, because it's hard. It's hard to grasp the enormous vast space held by the open ocean. It's hard to connect it to our everyday lives, even though the oxygen that we breathe and a lot of the resources that we rely on literally only exist because of the open ocean. But I try to tell people about seals. Like Patches is a seal that I talk a lot about because my husband and I have actually written a children's book about it. I don't think
Patches. No, you haven't mentioned this.
A seal named Patches.
Okay.
It's a children's book that basically tells the story of one seal. And it tells the story about how she goes out and how she explores the ocean and how she comes back and raises a pup and how she does that year after year and how we get to know her. And we get to see firsthand how her life is changing because of our actions. And there's a lot of drama in the story. I won't give away any details, but at some point Patches goes missing and we don't know where she is. And so the story takes the reader through, the sort of stress and the uncertainty around what's happening and what we can do to change it. And I tell people that story and the story of lots of other seals that we've kept track of as part of our research program to help them feel connected to the ocean and to ask them the question of, even if you aren't 100% sure you believe that something's changing, or even if you aren't 100% sure that humans are causing that change, is there really a downside to being careful with our actions, to making decisions that we have the power to make? So if we can buy an electric car instead of a gas-powered one, or maybe if we're lucky enough to have the resources to put solar panels on our house, or if we can be more careful about recycling instead of throwing things away, or if we can support political candidates that maybe have an eye on preserving natural spaces so that the animals that are the explorers of our planet can enjoy those places. Is there really a downside to doing that? And if so, is that downside so big that it's not worth doing, even if you're a little bit uncertain about whether things are changing and whether your actions are causing it? Because to me, I fundamentally believe things are changing and I believe that humans are causing those changes, but I would do those actions anyways, even if I didn't. And I think if a few more people believe that, if a few more people made those decisions, it would really go a long way, because I alone and you alone and 5 billion people alone can't change the trajectory of our future. We all have to do it together. It's a shared commons and it's up to all of us to protect it.
You and I are sort of in an echo chamber, right? We say the same thing and we, go to these science symposiums. In fact, there's research to show that people actually dig in deeper to their misplayed beliefs. But I do think there is opportunity to go just outside that tent or echo chamber. How are you engaging people that you feel are, maybe on the fence about these things? Are you doing it through stories like Patches, or is it a different approach, depending on who you're speaking to?
Yeah, it's an amazing question, one I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of years. And the PBS feature that I sent you is one of the examples of the ways in which we've tried to say yes to all opportunities that involve us sharing our joy and wonder and curiosity with people. Because I think it's not just about the science. I think when I started as a scientist, I loved it so much. I was like, how could people not understand this? Or how could people not love it? But that's okay. It's not necessarily about the science. Science is one way in which we understand how the world works, or we, come up with tools to protect it. But if people have what I like to call the explorer mindset, if people are curious and interested in what's around them, they too can seek information about how things work. They can come up with their own decisions. And it doesn't have to be scientists. It doesn't have to be, students in school. It can be anybody from a red state to a blue state. It can be people on the East Coast, West Coast, in the middle of the country, across the pond, somewhere else in the world. But if they feel joy and they feel inspiration and they feel wonder about what it's like to step foot on the ice in Antarctica, or what it's like to breathe underwater on scuba, to be with the fishes in their coral reef habitat, or what it's like to, take a boat to the middle of the Bering Sea and be on a remote island where there are more species of birds than there are number of people. If people wonder what that's like, or they experience that, or we can somehow bring that joy and that experience back to them, whether it's through a TV show or through a children's book or through a bracelet. We're selling bracelets now, where you get an app and you can follow a seal, and 220,000 people are wearing those bracelets and have our tracking data from the seals right in the palm of their hand. The more we can do that, the more likely we are to convince people who wouldn't normally think about science in their day-to-day lives to at least think about nature and the animal explorers that are making a living on our planet. And I think that's a really powerful opportunity to help spread the word about the importance of conserving our planet.
And so when you have a young man or a young woman say, hey, I want to do what you do, what do you tell them that's the best and the worst of what you do?
I mean, I think the most frustrating thing is probably the part where you start, because at least for me, like, this didn't come naturally to me. I didn't know scientists. I didn't really know, like, I grew up in San Diego. I knew I wanted to go to Antarctica. I'd never been to the snow. I moved up to Northern California for college. That felt cold. I went to graduate school in Alaska. That felt even colder, but still wasn't the Antarctic. I figured out, okay, I need to get a down jacket or this is going to be a really miserable experience. So you learn, and it's not always comfortable to step outside of your comfort zone, but your comfort zone is your comfort zone because at some point you stepped out of it and then that became part of the comfort zone, right? And as you go through life, you expand that. You say, maybe I could go to the Antarctic. Maybe I could dive 100 feet under the ocean surface. Maybe I could step on the moon. I mean, lots of people have done these things now, right? And we're lucky to walk in their footsteps, but it's always about expanding our comfort zone. And I think that never feels super great at the beginning because you feel bad at it, or you don't feel like you belong there, or you don't know anyone who's done that thing. And so I think, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a discomfort that you kind of have to get used to as part of the process of stepping outside the boundaries of what you thought you were capable of. I think the best thing is then feeling comfortable in those spaces, right? It's, me bringing undergraduate students into the field to sedate a 1,000-pound seal in the pouring rain on the beach. That was not in my comfort zone when I started working here. And now I love it. I get to experience their joy. We get to collect amazing data. We get to bond over the craziness that we're experiencing. And that feels really satisfying. It feels amazing to be able to now have that in my comfort zone. And then I get to watch them do the same thing, go from being timid and hesitant and not know what to pack and not wear enough layers and be really cold and miserable, to a couple of years later being absolute rock stars where they're getting interviewed on TV shows and they get to spread the word about what we do and they get to teach other people. So I think the worst is not having everything in your comfort zone and having to sort of force yourself out of that. And then the best is finally feeling like you've done that and like you are capable of anything, because I really do honestly believe that's true.
So is there a big next step or major dream for you? I have to imagine, given your sort of very enthusiastic approach to science and life, that once you've hit one level, there's the bigger and better. What's the bigger and better?
Yeah, I think for me, it's expanding a little bit more into the education research side of things, which sounds crazy because I am a scientist interested in seals, but I've seen firsthand so many times how these sorts of field-based learning experiences, how the opportunity to become an explorer, be an explorer, practice being an explorer, master being an explorer, teach other people how to be an explorer, how that's changed people's lives. And particularly in this political climate, I really think the power of changing the trajectory of one life is so much power. And the more that we do research on the impact of that, the more that we can provide evidence to our institutions or to funding agencies or to people to support individual students. And we can scale the impact of our ability to bring students outside so that they can have those life-changing experiences. So the more that we can do that, I lead a research team where we collect data on the student experience and how different parts of college curriculum can be tweaked to involve more going outside, more exploring, and how that changes people's lives. So the more we can do that and the more we can scale the impact of it, I think the more explorers that will be around, and I think our planet will be a better place for it.
Roxanne, thank you for your enthusiasm. I truly believe that passion is what makes the world go round. It really does. It motivates people to do things that aren't just about themselves. It's I think the term is doing well by doing good. And so I've so enjoyed hearing this. You've renewed my faith once again in science and exploration. So thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, thanks so much, Richard. And thanks for the opportunity to be part of the Explorers Club. I mean, we think that we know lots of people who share that joy and that passion. And then sometimes we end up in a room like the annual dinner where you're just surrounded by people who have such a shared system of values and a vision for what the future can be like. And I think it's fuel to the fire. So I really appreciate it.
Roxanne, you were part of that fabric now. You were part of that fabric. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed our podcast. Now we have a little favor to ask. We'd really appreciate your support, so make sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. See you out on the trail.